everyone, welcome to part 2 of my Elisabeth cosplay series. If you saw part 1, that's where I worked on the foundations and explained a little bit about why I'm making this cosplay. So with the crinoline and the main petticoat done, it was time for me to start working on the actual dress. So the dress itself is made up of a skirt and a bodice as 2 separate pieces. So the first bit that I tackled was obviously the skirt because of just how huge it was, and then I kind of rushed doing the bodice at the end, which I wouldn't advise anyone doing, but I was actually quite happy with the way the bodice turned out, despite the fact that that was the bit that I ended up rushing. I seem to do things a little bit better when I rush at them because I'm not thinking too much about what I'm doing and just going by the book or how I know how to do it. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this and I hope you find it interesting. So thank you for clicking on this video, and here's how I made the skirt and the bodice. So here are some of the reference images that I used when I was looking at fabrics. So I got a lot of samples for different places because I knew I was going to need a range of different materials for this. So these are just a few of the samples I got of the thinner material. So this was the fabric that I liked the most. Unfortunately, when I went back a week later to go and get the fabric, they didn't actually have that fabric in stock. So I had to get a different fabric instead. Just a note, normally if a fabric store has got low stock on a fabric, they will actually let you know when you go and look at it. This was actually a brand new roll of fabric they'd only just had in, and the entire roll was bought by a film company in the week that I was deciding which fabric to have, which is why it was such a shock that I went and they'd sold out. These are the samples of the thicker fabric that I was going to use mostly as a lining layer to sort of support the really lightweight fabrics underneath and help the dress sort of keep its shape and everything. I didn't end up choosing one of these in the end because I wasn't quite happy, and I found a completely different fabric from another shop that I didn't have a sample from originally. These are the 3 different fabrics that I bought for this dress. So the top layer needed to be a tulle. So I found this really nice, lightweight, quite tightly woven tulle that really didn't feel plasticky at all, which was good. Then I had this sort of heavier silk for the bottom layer and this really nice lightweight silk organza that I was going to use to paint the stars on. Following a pattern from the Victorian dressmaker book that I showed in my previous video, I started by cutting out all of the skirt pieces in all of the different fabrics, so I knew that they would all be the same size so that I wouldn't have any odd shapes. As obviously working with a fabric like this that is very slidey and easy to move, it would have been really easy to have lots of different shaped panels and different sizes. So there are a lot of panels for this skirt, as you have one front panel, and then you have 2 side panels, and then you have 2 back panels. This can be tricky as it was quite easy to get the panels confused, and I had to keep them in a specific order so I knew I wasn't going to get them mixed up. Once I had stitched all of the organza skirt panels together, I then started working on painting the stars. So I made these little templates, and I found that this one, which obviously has got a lot of gold paint around it, was the best, and I used this Dylon fabric paint. I found it was really easy to use. You just have to paint it on, let it dry, and then use a piece of spare fabric to sort of iron over it to sort of heat set it so that it doesn't sort of get washed off. There were a lot of stars to paint on this dress, and it took me a very long time. I think it took me 3 whole days to paint all of the stars on, because what I would do is I would paint 5 or 6 stars and then have to iron them before then moving on to a different section of the skirt. It was easier to do it with the skirt constructed all together, as it meant that then I could sort of have them going in the right direction and it just made it easier that I didn't have to try and think about, oh, what if I need to sew over these, and I could have them over the seams as well, which I think looked quite nice, the ones that I did paint over the seam. Like I said, you have to iron the stars in place to sort of heat set them, so you do this using a spare piece of cloth or something, just so it doesn't actually get the iron all messy, as obviously they won't 100% dry, but it is best to sort of leave it until they are mostly dry, as then you don't get too much on the fabric either. But if you're not trying to paint 1,000 stars onto a skirt, then it's probably best to let them dry 100% before ironing them. It was just me being in a rush, having limited time to do this. When I'd finally finished painting all of the stars onto the skirt, I then connected the organza layer and the heavier silk layer together so that I could do the cartridge pleats at the top on the back, and then other types of pleats around the rest of the skirt. Then it was on to actually doing the tulle layer, which I didn't really want to be as connected to the rest of the skirt, so it would float more independently. Sewing the tulle layers of the skirt together was a little bit of a nightmare, as the stuff was it had a mind of its own, and it was just so light that the machine just didn't really know what to do with it. Next it was adding the waistband, which I could have done a little bit better, as I didn't quite catch the tulle in all the way around. There's a couple of places where it pokes out a bit, and I did make the waistband a little bit too short to begin with, so I had to add a little section on. But mostly I think, this is the first time I've actually done a waistband with this type of skirt, so I think as a first attempt I'm quite happy with it. I put a hook and bar and a press stud on, as I knew this was going to be quite a heavy skirt, so I just wanted that extra little bit of security to make sure it stayed together, and I think it looks really nice. It's a bit scrunched up at the moment, but yeah. I then added a placket just to give it that extra little bit of closure at the back. I'm quite happy. This is the first time I've made a skirt of this size, and I think, it was a good first attempt. Then it was on to making the bodice. I had to cut all of the pattern pieces out in the 3 different types of fabric again, which wasn't too bad, as it was a bit easier to tell the different pieces apart than what it was with the skirt. I then started to flatline all of the pieces together, apart from the tulle overlayer, because again I wanted that to sort of have its own freedom apart from the other pieces of fabric. So really it was just the lining and then the organza layer that I was going to paint stars on. And obviously then it was on to painting more stars again once I'd constructed the bodice. With the main part of the bodice constructed, it was then onto the sleeves, which again required a lot of fabric, as they are really big and puffy. So first of all I had to make the puffy sleeves, which you do by creating this little puffy thing by having one big piece of fabric that then connects to an inner part of the sleeve, which is much smaller, and you gather them together, and then eventually they make these little donut things. I then started to work on the tulle and organza layers of the sleeves, so this required me to cut out a lot of circles that would then be gathered over the top of the little puffy part of the sleeve, which would then create this effect of lots of different layers when there weren't really as many layers. I had to paint stars again on the organza layer. This didn't take quite as much time. At this point I was starting to rush a lot with making this dress, so there was a lot less footage, and I did sort of, film things as I'd finished them. Then I had to connect all of those layers of tulle and organza together before trying to shove them inside the sleeve head.
as I said, because I was rushing, I didn't quite get footage of everything that I was doing, so one of the things I had to add to the bodice was this bertha, which also had this little pleated bit of tulle around the top. This was quite tricky to do, because obviously I had to pleat all the different layers of the bertha, as it required all the different layers of the material so it would match the rest of the outfit, but also that it would need to have this bit of tulle shoved in when I was sewing it in place. As you can see, the different layers of the sleeve and how they look and how they sort of puff out. I also added some pleats into the tulle, so I sort of made the tulle panels slightly bigger so they would ruffle out a little bit. The bodice closes with these hook and eyes, and it actually fits really nicely. I was kind of worried about the fit as I was rushing it, that it wouldn't fit very well, but I was really pleased with the fit in the end. And that was the finished outfit, just in time for MusicalCon. I had to rush to get the wig and everything sorted like the night before, which was like a really bad idea, but here it is.
So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I am going to do a part 3, which might then end up turning into a part 4, as I want to show you all the edits that I've been making on the cosplay itself. So this includes, like, I wanted to actually have a corset for it, I wanted to make a better petticoat for it, or just another petticoat in general, because I just felt like it didn't quite have the volume that it needed. And then there's a couple of little edits that I want to do on the bodice, and obviously the wig was a bit atrocious really. So what I might do is a part 3, which is just all the sewing stuff that I did, and then maybe a part 4 looking at things like the wig and little bits like that that I wanted to improve on. So thank you for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye!